Good morning to our viewers. Well, EcoBank its headquarters are in Lome in Togo, but it has a huge presence in West Africa. We understand that it's present in about 37 countries on the continent. So what Altu Sadi said yesterday is that he was the CFO for cards and electronic banking at the bank until he was fired. He said that he was fired for what they called unsubstantiated claims, for making unsubstantiated claims. He said that he had raised that the bank seems to be not reporting their finances well in terms of exchange, they reporting currency and converting it to the dollars. The way they did it, he says, it kind of inflated their profits. It looked as though they are making more money than they actually are. So he said that this bank is beset with corporate governance scandals. He mentioned a case where the former CEO was fired for another case where he took the bank to court and they had to pay him. He actually, in his case, took the bank to court, and then he won the case, but then the bank has actually decided that they are going to appeal that. So the reason why this bank is important for this commission is that the PIC invested about $250 million in the bank in 2012, and as time went on, we understand that they came to know about the governance issues, the corporate governance issues that the bank had, and he said that during the former CEO's trial in court, actually Majila did say that if they had known, they would not have put money in this bank. But as time went, the PIC went ahead again and issued $98 million loan facility to this bank, and also again in 2016 again invested bought a convertible bond which would allow them to be able to convert this to either shares in the bank or to cash if should the bank not be able to pay the bond back. So now what we understand is that they invested that $250 million again. So this bank, we understand that it's Majila, as they bought into the bank, they had to, remember the PIC has to second someone from the fund manager to the investee company. So Majila took up a seat on the board of EcoBank. Now, as the commission heard yesterday, we understand that the bank paid each board member about $100,000 for a year for being on the board of that bank. Also about $3,000 in terms of allowances, and $20,000 in terms of the purchase of first class airline tickets. According to PIC policy, the people that they second to different boards and companies that they invest in are not supposed to get any payment for that. The money that they're supposed to be paid should go to the PIC. Now, the commission has asked the investigators to look into whether the bank actually paid the money that they paid into the PIC account, or if the money went to Majila. That's about it, about the EcoBank that we heard about yesterday, Blaine. Yeah,
the Commission of Inquiry also heard from the PIC's executive head of human resources, I guess answering to allegations of victimization of staff. What stood out from this testimony?
Remember, since the commission started, there have been a few employees and former employees that came through that mentioned how they were victimized. I think another issue that caused problems at the PIC was the change in the organogram, where it was found that some position became redundant. So what they're saying is while some people were sort of promoted, got higher positions and higher jumps in terms of salaries that they were getting, there were others that were demoted, sort of got positions that were at lower levels than where they were. And these people actually felt like they were being victimized. They felt like it's because of some issues. They felt like this was being used to punish those that kind of fell out of favor with the management at the time. And another issue that he mentioned was allegations that disciplinary hearings at the PIC were being used to punish people per se that fall out of favor, and they were asked as to whether disciplinary hearings are they an issue of the last resort that they use in terms of ensuring discipline in the organization, or is it something that they just go to in terms of the kind of cases that we've heard about in the commission. And he actually said that no, in cases of serious misconduct, then that's where you find that disciplinary hearing is an issue of first resort where they go to immediately. But we heard of cases. One thing that stood out in his testimony was over 2 days. One thing that stood out was you remember the IT head of Vyoka Semenya that also appeared here at the commission talking about how she was victimized, how she was called into Dr. Den's office, told to compile passwords of all the computer systems in the company. And while she was in the process of doing that, she was called again, she was issued a letter of suspension, and she was put on suspension, and subsequently she now settled with the PIC. They gave her 7.2 million rands to leave the company. But this came out of those James Nogu emails. You remember that when those emails started coming out with serious allegations of corruption at the PIC instructed the IT department to investigate as to who this James Nogu was, to find out who James Nogu was. But then in that case, because there was such an air of distrust in the PIC, so what happened is now they went to the police to open a case, but this was kept secret by the people in the IT department. When they've brought in an investigator, an external investigator, to find out who that James Nogu was, they found out that there's actually a case of corruption that has been opened. But what happened is, when they went to the police to open a case, the police said, no, there's nothing wrong with whistleblowing in South Africa. What is wrong is what they're more interested in is the allegations that were contained in that of corruption against the CEO. So they opened a case. So now what happens is, now when the CEO now found out about this, they said that there were serious cases of victimization. We saw people like Vyoka Semenya that I just mentioned leaving the organization, saying she was forced out. She was told that she was not trusted anymore. She left. And now we understand that the board has decided to rescind that decision to bring her back into the organization to negotiate how they to rescind the settlement that they had agreed on with her to leave the company. Yeah. So we'll see now if she indeed does come back to the PIC, or like the company secretary who went through the same thing, a similar thing really. Yeah. And she's now back at work after she went through a disciplinary hearing, and then she was told that she was found guilty, and then she was leaving the organization. But the board decided not to uphold that decision by the disciplinary hearing commissioner, and decided that she should be back at work. She's now back at work at the PIC as we speak. Right.
Has Chris Polwane concluded his testimony? You mentioned something about 2 days.
Yes, he has concluded his testimony. It took over 2 days because it was such a long document that he had to present. There were so many allegations that he had to answer to. But today we expect to hear from Kevin Penwarden. He's the CEO of SA Home Loans. This is another case that we had a lot about in the commission. He will take the PIC through. You remember when Ian Stanton last week appeared here, he mentioned that when JP Morgan, their partner then, during the 2008-2009 financial crisis, couldn't keep up with putting money into SA Home Loans as it was going through financial difficulties. They decided that perhaps they should dispose of their 50% shareholding. Now, Standard Bank was a shareholder as well, 50% shareholding. Now, when they now decided that they are selling the other 50%, JP Morgan decided to sell the other 50%. Standard Bank approached the Government Employees Pension Fund as a potential partner in this, and indeed represented by the PIC, they decided to take up on the offer and decided to buy those shares. But along the way, the PIC now brought in Bolaja Floro Consortium. This is a consortium that was led by Kulufelo Maponya, who is belongs to Matume Maponya Investment Holdings. But what we had before this was that Maponya was indeed actually one that introduced introduced the PIC to this transaction, but Standard Bank came and said, no, actually we approached the PIC to invest in this on behalf of the Government Employees Pension Fund, but along the way, the PIC now brought in this consortium led by Khulufelo Maponya. And actually, when Ian Stanton appeared last week, he said that he actually asked as to why was he chosen to be part of this, and he said that it was because of his relationship with the former CEO, Dr. Dan Machila. So we expect to hear more about this transaction as to what happened. And remember as well that the PIC then funded this consortium. They got 25% out of the 50% that was being issued. PIC now got 25%, and this consortium got 25%, and they funded that. And despite the concerns that this consortium did not have enough resources to be able to meet obligations that may be required as time went, the PIC said no, it's okay that they would fund whatever obligations that this company may have towards SA Home Loans. Now, as time went, SA Home Loans now got a loan from the PIC of 9 billion rand to issue home loans to government employees. They said that Khulufelo Maponya, who was now a shareholder at the SA Home Loans and also on the board of the SA Home Loans, he said that he was supposed to be paid 45 million rands for transaction origination, saying that it was because of his intervention that the PIC issued a loan to SA Home Loans, and that Standard Bank said that it was irregular for a shareholder and a board member to be paid for a transaction that the company did, and PIC now said that they would forego a fund, 45 million rand that was due to the GEPF because of the transaction in favor of Khulufelo Maponya. But when Standard Bank raised that this seems irregular as well, they kind of rescinded on that decision and said it was actually, there's nothing that's binding them to be able to do that. And now Khulufelo Maponya of Matume Maponya Investments now took this matter to court, where the court is now supposed to decide as to whether he is indeed entitled to be paid this 45 million rand, or if, as well as to who is supposed to pay this 45 million rand, if indeed he is entitled to that. Another issue blame that came out is that after this 9 billion rand was drawn down in this SA Home Loans transaction, they went back to the PIC to request a further 10 billion rand loan facility. We understand that as they were in the process of this, they said that Khulufelo Maponya came to them with a representative on the board of SA Home Loans from the PIC, that's Wellington Masegeza. They said to them that if they wanted to get this 10 billion rand, they had to now pay an extra 50 million rand to Khulufelo Maponya for them to get the loan from the PIC. This was supposed to now be 95 million rand, be it the 45 million rand that they refused to pay, that is now a subject of litigation, and the 50 million rand that is now part of a percentage of the 10 billion rand that they had requested from the PIC. They said now that they obviously refused to pay that, and they said that there's nothing that has happened with that transaction. They haven't had anything from the PIC, but they haven't also been able to establish the authenticity of these claims that they said the two people that came with this suggestion said it had come from Dr. Majila, who was then who is now the former PIC CEO. At that time, around this, when this happened, he resigned from the PIC. So they said that they could not call him to authenticate these claims. But we'll hear more about this case when the commission resumes at 10 o'clock. Blaine?
Comprehensive as always. Thank you very much indeed for your good reporting. We'll try to catch up with you a little later on. That was glorious. Sefako Musi live for us in the capital. All right, it is now 9:51. Let's take